In 2014, former UFC fighter John Koppenhaver, known as War Machine, broke into his ex-girlfriend Christy Mack's home, finding her with another man. What followed was a brutal assault. He beat the man unconscious and then turned on Mack, fracturing her ribs, breaking her nose, and attempting to rape her. She managed to escape while he searched for a knife. Koppenhaver fled, posted tweets defending his actions, and was later captured in a California motel. At trial, he was found guilty on 29 charges and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 36 years. The UFC has erased his name from its history. No replays, tributes, or updates. The story of War Machine is buried, a stain on the brand that even ESPN won't cover. Travis Fulton was the most prolific fighter in MMA history. Over 300 professional bouts. He fought in the UFC, in regional promotions, and in bars. His name was etched into the sport's mythology. If you needed a guy on short notice, you called Fulton. Everything changed in 2021 when he was arrested on federal charges related to child pornography and sexual exploitation of a minor. Investigators revealed overwhelming evidence, some filmed by Fulton himself. The man known for his iron chin had a secret life far darker than anything inside the cage. While awaiting trial in Iowa, Fulton took his own life, hanging himself in his cell without ever facing the court. The UFC has never commented on the matter. His fight record remains in databases, but the sport has quietly distanced itself from a man whose crimes are almost unspeakable. Travis Fulton's story is not about redemption or legacy, it's about how a legend hid. Evan Tanner was a UFC middleweight champion, known for being a quiet thinker and an unconventional fighter. He taught himself to fight using VHS tapes, avoiding big gyms and trash talk. He simply didn't fit the mold. As the sport evolved, Tanner began to drift, struggling with alcohol. His performances declined, and he often disappeared for stretches, re-emerging for last-minute fights out of necessity or stubbornness. In 2008, he posted a blog entry about heading into the California desert alone on his motorcycle, bringing minimal supplies to clear his head. He underestimated the conditions, and when his water ran out, he texted a friend for help. Sadly, by the time rescuers arrived, it was too late. Evan Tanner was 37. The UFC paid tribute at the time, but his name has since faded into obscurity, mentioned only in passing. His death was ruled an accident, but for those who knew him, the signs of a man slipping through the cracks were evident for years. A champion, a poet, a wanderer, his story ends not in the octagon, but alone under the desert sun. In the late 90s, Mark Kerr was a monster, undefeated in Vale Tudo and unstoppable in early Pride FC. Known as the Smashing Machine, his nickname reflected not just his violence in the cage, but the toll on his body outside it. Kerr struggled with a severe addiction to painkillers, opioids, and injectables to numb his injuries and fears. He would win fights in Japan, then collapse backstage, barely able to speak. The documentary The Smashing Machine captures his decline. Kerr popping pills mid-sentence, breaking down emotionally, all while his life unraveled. Despite multiple rehab attempts and efforts to return, his body and mind gave out. The UFC brought him in during the early 2000s, but he was a shadow of his former self. Today, Mark Kerr is alive, but largely forgotten by the MMA mainstream. He serves as a cautionary tale from a time before the UFC implemented wellness programs and drug testing. The UFC doesn't promote the Smashing Machine documentary. ESPN doesn't run retrospectives. Mark Kerr is a ghost, proof that greatness doesn't guarantee survival. BJ Penn was once the pride of Hawaii, one of the UFC's most naturally gifted fighters. He captured titles at lightweight and welterweight, earning the nickname The Prodigy and the respect of fans and peers alike. However, his rise turned into a painful fall. Penn's life outside the octagon spiraled out of control with arrests for domestic violence, public outbursts, and multiple legal issues. Friends distanced themselves, sponsors vanished, and the once unstoppable force became a cautionary tale. His final UFC fights were disastrous, marked by brutal knockouts, revealing a fighter broken both physically and mentally. At press conferences, he often appeared glazed over, sometimes refusing to respond to questions. The UFC has distanced itself from him, offering no redemption story, while ESPN barely acknowledges his struggles, focusing instead on past highlights. BJ Penn's story is a harsh reminder that even legends can fall hard, and the darkest battles often occur within. In 2015, Thiago Silva was involved in a violent standoff with police in Florida after threatening his ex-wife and barricading himself inside his home. SWAT teams responded, leading to a dangerous situation that lasted for hours. Silva was arrested and charged with multiple felonies, including aggravated assault and domestic violence. The UFC acted quickly, severing ties with him permanently. Although the charges were eventually dropped, Silva's reputation was irrevocably damaged. The UFC erased him from their roster, and his career never recovered. His story serves as a grim reminder of how quickly a fighter's violent tendencies can spill into real life, and how the UFC addresses those moments it can no longer ignore. ignore. Cain Velasquez was one of the most dominant heavyweight champions in UFC history, a relentless fighter with a warrior's spirit. But in 2023, his life took a shocking turn beyond the octagon. Velasquez was arrested for attempted murder after allegedly chasing down and shooting a man accused of molesting his child relative. The incident unfolded like a real-life revenge thriller: guns drawn, shots fired, and police intervention. The MMA community was divided. Many rallied around Cain, calling him a protective family man. Others feared the consequences of a hero-turned-vigilante. Legal battles continue, but the UFC has stayed silent publicly. Cain's legacy is now forever tangled in a story ESPN won't cover in full. Lee Murray wasn't just a UFC fighter, he was a criminal mastermind. Once a promising prospect in the UFC's early days, Murray's name is better known for one of the biggest bank robberies in UK history. In 2006, Murray led an armed heist of nearly $73 million in cash and gold bullion. The robbery was violent and ruthless, involving automatic weapons and a chaotic escape. Murray was captured in Morocco and remains in prison. The UFC quietly removed him from their history, and no official mention of his crimes exist in MMA's public record. His story is a dark, twisted intersection of MMA fame and criminal infamy, proof that sometimes the biggest fight isn't in the cage, but on the streets. Abel Trujillo was a promising lightweight in the UFC, known for his aggressive style and exciting fights. But his career was marred by repeated off-cage violence and legal issues. In 2018, Trujillo was arrested and charged with multiple counts of domestic violence and kidnapping after a brutal altercation with his girlfriend. The UFC quickly cut him from the roster. Since then, Trujillo's public appearances have been rare. The sport has largely erased him, leaving behind only his highlight reels and a string of disturbing headlines. His story is a grim reminder of how the UFC's toughest fighters can sometimes fall hardest when the cage door closes. Josh Grisby once looked like a future UFC star, dazzling fans with speed and technique, but behind the bright lights was a man battling demons that would destroy his career and reputation. Grisby was arrested multiple times for domestic abuse, including one chilling incident where he allegedly sicked dogs on his girlfriend. The UFC cut ties and Grisby faded from the spotlight, his promising career extinguished by violence and legal battles. Grisby's story is one of talent lost and the ugly realities that sometimes lurk beneath a fighter's fame. Tim Hague was a Canadian heavyweight known for his toughness and heart inside the cage, but his story ended in tragedy, far from the UFC spotlight. In 2017, during a boxing match, not MMA, Hague suffered a severe brain injury after being knocked out. He slipped into a coma and died days later. His death highlighted the brutal risks fighters face, even outside the UFC, and raised hard questions about fighter safety and the long-term damage of combat sports. Matt Hughes is a legendary figure in mixed martial arts, known for his dominance in the UFC's welterweight division and his two-time championship reign. A pioneer of the sport, he showcased exceptional wrestling and striking skills, helping to elevate MMA's popularity. Hughes faced significant challenges after a serious train accident in 2017, resulting in severe injuries and long-term cognitive effects. Despite these struggles, he remains a beloved figure in the MMA community, advocating for fighter safety and mental health awareness. Notably, the UFC and ESPN have been relatively quiet about his situation. While they acknowledge his legacy, discussions of his health struggles and recovery have not received much attention. This lack of coverage contrasts with the narratives surrounding other fighters, leading some fans to feel that his story is overlooked. Hughes' journey highlights the ongoing battles athletes face beyond their competitive careers, reminding us of the resilience required in and out of the cage. Kevin Randleman was a former UFC heavyweight champion and Pride veteran, famous for his explosive athleticism and relentless style. But outside the cage, Randleman battled serious health problems, including multiple strokes in his late 30s that severely affected his mobility and speech. Despite his struggles, Randleman's legacy in MMA remains influential, yet his personal health battles and his premature death in 2016 at age 44 are often overlooked in the UFC narrative. The UFC celebrates the wins, the glory, the moments that sell pay-per-views, but the cost, the real cost, is often hidden in silence. These are the stories the UFC and ESPN don't want you to hear, but they're part of the sport's history, and if we're honest, they deserve to be told. That's all for now. Subscribe for more and comment what other story do you think I should have included.